Hello, and this is the Oral Histories from the Oklahoma State University Institute of Technology. I'm Clinton Gherkin, the archivist, and we have a very special guest here, James McCullough. Can you introduce yourself?
I'm James McCullough. I am a retired employee of OSUIT, 35 years of service here. So I don't know how much more you need from that or not, or we can talk about what I did or whatever here when you want to ask the question.
Okay, first question. What were your positions prior to joining OSUIT?
I actually worked with one of the other graduates. We actually had a partnership, and I was part owner with a design and sign shop that was called Art Vark Graphic, and that name has actually been resurfaced because my partner, he has actually restarted that biz. So that's a whole nother saga. But from there, I went and I was the lead illustrator and designer for the United States JCs, which is the Junior Chamber of Commerce, at their national headquarters in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And when I left there, I went out on my own as a freelance designer and illustrator with McCullough Design and Illustration. And I still run that to a certain extent today.
Okay, next question. How did these previous positions influence your time working at OSUIT?
Well, it really had uh, everything to do with it as far as an influence, because the whole reason I came here was and that maybe is what I need to say. I mean, I spent 2 years here as a student. I actually graduated from here, so when I came back here to work, I came back because I thought I could offer something from my experience, having been out in the industry. And these particular positions that I held had allowed me to do a lot of different things, to see and be a part of a lot of different aspects of the industry, to have really kind of hone my skill and be able to then come in and offer that to students.
Next question. What led you to OSUIT?
Good question. But here's my question for you: as a student or as a faculty? Because as a student coming here, what drew me here was the fact that they had what I wanted. They had the course of study that I wanted to study. And the best part about it, I could finish it in 2 years with not a lot of debt. And it was focused on my career choice. I didn't have to do a lot of other things that I was not really excited about doing at that time. And so, as a student, this was the perfect fit for me. And I actually had scholarship and even a free ride to two other universities, and I chose not to go to them. I came here. So it was I think to my mother's chagrin, she wasn't excited about it, but then she actually came over here to school and and graduated and went into a different career direction too. So as a faculty, the reason I ended up here and the reason I kind of came to OSUIT was I was asked to fill in for the then division chair, dean, whatever you want to refer to us as. He had just recently been hired into that position, so they needed somebody quick to be able to fill an adjunct type position at the time, for 2 months while they were doing a job search for somebody to fill in full time. I adjunct for 4 months, the whole semester, and was offered the job, and I took it. So that's kind of what led me here. But then I also need to add this. I felt not only that I could bring something, I had something to offer. I had experience, I had a wherewithal, I had connections that I could bring to the student and bring to the division as far as the what we did as far as the program. I also was completely supportive of what we were doing, how we did it, the way that we did it. So I thought I had friends that had gone to other design programs at other universities, other places, and they just didn't get what we were getting here. And so I felt completely comfortable with the idea of being able to uh, easily slide into that position. Did I have a teaching background? Was teaching something that I had wanted to do all my life? Nope, it wasn't. As a matter of fact, it was a question that one of the faculty asked me straight up. Was that a passion of mine was to teach? It wasn't at that time. I had never even thought about it. That was not my goal as far as my career choice. So to do that was completely different. But what I found out real quickly was with help from the other faculty, but also from the division chair, and then just knowing what I had been through with the program, I felt that I could add a lot to it, and I could add, bring my experiences, my understanding, and what we were doing right then to the table, to the students, and that would be to their benefit. And so I took the position at that point in time.
Okay. Next question. Can you please describe what your position was here and what it entailed?
Initially as a faculty and as a faculty member, and that was originally what I thought I was going to do, and that was going to basically last about 5 years, and then I was going to leave and go back into industry. That was the plan. That was the game plan. And what I did was what basically every faculty, at least that I know of, and especially in the different trade areas, did. You wrote curriculum. You basically, taught that curriculum. You tested it as far as how it best worked and what didn't. You were part of the marketing of your program. You were a recruiter for the program. You basically did anything that anybody asked that needed to have something framed or had a poster made or a birthday card or whatever. You did those type of things because we were in the creative area, and that's what they wanted from us. We did a little bit of all of those things, and that's what I did because I had run a sign shop, and I had worked for an outdoor company, and I had worked for a major organization that each of the different people that I worked for within that organization, we did promotional stuff for each of their programs. And so I had an experience in doing that, so that's what we did. And that's what, as faculty, that's what we were asked to do. We served on committees. We served on, it was a little bit of everything to be able to promote not just the visual communications department at OSUIT, but it was also to promote OSUIT. At that time, OSU Tech, OSU Omogi, OSU Omogi Technical Branch. I mean, how many reiterations do you want to go through over 35 years? But for 26 years, I was a classroom instructor. We did field trips. I basically started the first year after I came here. We went on our first major summer field trip and took them to Kansas City. And then from then we were off and running, and we went to Dallas, and we went to Chicago, and we went to Indianapolis, and we went to Denver, and we went to Austin, and we went to San Antonio, and we went to Nashville, and St. Louis. And every year we went someplace different. The reason was to expose the students to things that they hadn't seen before, or to basically help them understand why we taught what we were teaching. So they had an opportunity to see how they would literally fit into this industry. I also was the sponsor of the club for pretty much the time that I started here until I left. I was a sponsor for the Visual Communications Collective is what it finished out as. I don't know if it's even in existence anymore, but is it still? Good. But did it for 35 years. That I was, I even as I became in 2000, I moved from being a classroom instructor to being the division chair, dean, however you want to classify us. I became over the visual communications department. And even in that capacity, I also continued to be the sponsor of the club. I thought that was important to still have that connection with the student. And so I continued in that role as the co-sponsor. From that standpoint, it just became, I was kind of taken out of the classroom in all aspects except for internship. I still ran the internship program for most of the time that I was a division chair. And that was a huge deal because we sent interns all over the United States as well as internationally. And so it was something that I took as a big part of what, I wanted to do and continue to be a part of, to still, be able to get the students out there and be able to get them in places where they could see how they could actually apply the things that they'd learned. And then beyond that, as far as now, I became an administrator, which was never really planning on being, but I got to do that, and that became a whole nother job description right there, real quickly. But it had all of the same kind of things from the standpoint of recruiting and working with and being there for students and being there with now other faculty and other divisions on campus and other stakeholders to work with them, be it whatever program that we had that we worked with. But it also meant going out and trying to find funding, trying to find additional students as far as beyond just your basic recruiting. You were constantly trying to figure out what's the next thing that's on the horizon, where do we go from here, how do we continue a program, those type of things. So it became a whole nother part of what I was doing. I mean, it just expanded it to that much. The thing I missed probably the most of any of it was being in the classroom. But on the other hand, I enjoyed up to a point the work that I was doing to try to help promote and increase the awareness of our program. So does that answer your question pretty well?
Oh, that was thorough. Yeah, that was very interesting. You gave us a lot. So our next question is, how do you feel? How did you feel at the state of the visual communications program when you started working here?
You know, uh, something that I figured out real quickly as a student, but then coming back as a faculty, was that we were on the cusp of everything changing. And I mean, we see it all the time now. We think that everything's just, but we saw huge changes right then. We When I came as a student, when I came first as a faculty, we did everything by hand. Everything was either drawn, created basically on a drawing board. You did all the pay steps for, be it a magazine or an ad or whatever you were working on. You did that. You literally had to have a typeset, and you had to paste it down, and you did it in galley sheets and galley forms, and you did all this manual work, and you needed to know then how that went from there. I mean, you needed to know and understand, not only were you doing this for something that you were working on, but you needed to understand the process of where it went from there. So you needed to know production, and you needed to know production processes, and you needed to know how to do that. So it was extremely involved. You had lots of extra people that you handed stuff off to. So no computer. Photography was just an added bonus, but you had to know how to work with it. You had to know how to. You didn't have Photoshop to be able to go in and alter or delete or add to photographs or whatever that you were dealing with. You had to learn how to do that by either airbrushing and or using become very skilled at using brushes and be able to go in and fix photography or enhance it as you needed to. And so you had to know all that by hand. So as a student, but then also as a faculty person, you came in and everything that you did was by hand. I mean, typesetting. We take type when we put something on a piece of paper. We think of it. You either did it with a typewriter or you did it by hand or you had it sent out and had type done. It wasn't like you had a personal computer. Oh, but wait, 1984, what happened?
Computer.
Yeah, the Macintosh. Oh, the Macintosh came out and that changed everything. Everything got changed in 1984. Personal computers became a thing. You had something literally on your desk that you could start doing. So we were one of the first colleges around here that actually had a lab that actually had computers in it, that we were actually creating something that you could use. But that lasted a nanosecond because then everybody was starting to use them and everybody started doing it. And then you started having everybody was going to be a graphic designer because they had a computer in front of them. And then you went, no, you don't understand the principles of design. You don't necessarily understand how things work and look and how they fit together. And you needed to learn that so that you could then now learn how to use that computer effectively. And so just this whole thing that we've been doing up to that point all got changed and all went out the window to a certain extent. I mean, we used to do all this stuff on light tables and big drafting boards and everything, and all of a sudden now, we were doing it in front of a screen, and it was just like, oh my gosh, this is certainly career changing, but it is literally altering the way that we think about how we approach things, how we do things. And so, but the program, it evolved with it. It did the things that it needed to do. It brought computers, and we've changed classrooms from being tabletop heavy, as far as what we were doing on a drafting board in essence, to now we were doing things on a personal computer. And so, that changed, and we were off to the races. I mean, our programs, this school was doing a lot of things that nobody, I mean, we had full labs that we were teaching software in, and most universities and colleges were basically going, we've got a lab over here and you get to go learn it on your own. And we weren't doing that. We were teaching people actually how to use and manipulate the program, which then put us in a wonderful position employment wise, because we were way ahead of the curve for everybody else. And we were teaching, our graduates were teaching places they were going to work how to use their computer. I mean, that was career changing at that time. That was a big deal. But as far as this program, it was doing those things. It was looking at that. We used our advisory boards. Oh my gosh, those advisory boards were critical to because they were coming in and they were saying, printing is not going away, but it's changing. And at that time, when I started working here, printing was over half of the student body. Okay. When I came as a student, in one part of the building, there were 16 machines called linotype machines. If you've never seen one, it's a big machine. It basically has a live lead well next to it, okay? Molten lead. And it basically, you type on what was basically a glorified typewriter, and it would type you out with using that liquid lead. It would basically push it up here, and then you typed it, and it gave you a line of type in lead that you then put into a deal for, a block that would go in and go on a press. That's how they did newspapers. They had magazines, everything. But that linotype machine was a clanking, because every time you pecked a letter, it clanked. So think about somebody who could type 60 words a minute, and you're click, 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 click. And now add 16 of those machines all going on one time. If you didn't have earplugs, it was maddening. There were 16 of those machines over in that building.
Wow.
The personal computer, or the computers came in. You know how many were left a year after that? Zero. Not a one. Other than one we kept around for a while because we thought we might make it a museum piece. But it was, there was no need for them anymore. All of a sudden, we had a computer that did. And so off it went. All that stuff went. We had two faculty that were in that area at that time that they serviced with the different surrounding newspapers and things like that. They serviced 300 of those linotype machines. A year after we got the computers, they basically had 20. They quit servicing them because it wasn't worth it to them anymore. That's what I'm saying. I mean, everything changed. We changed completely in that building. Suddenly all the press work, all of the pre-press work, all of that kind of stuff started rapidly changing. And so it shifted from a very heavy production area to a very heavily focused creative area. And so the population changed, the tactics of what we were doing changed, what we were teaching changed, everything had to change. And then you take that into consideration too. We went from, when I started here, both as a student and as a faculty, we had 4-hour shops, 5 days a week, okay? You came in, you were here usually you had to be in class by 7:30. That's hard to believe. You had to be in class at 7:30. Your 4-hour shop would be until 11:30. You took an hour lunch, and then you came back and you had an afternoon class that usually lasted 1 or 2 hours, and then you took your general education classes. So every day, or you flip flopped it. You had your gen eds in the morning, you had an afternoon. So you went from 1 until 5, and you were in an afternoon shop. And if you were lucky, you got all your gen eds done. You were in a 4 hour shop in the morning and a 4 hour shop in the afternoon. It was like a day job. And that was the one thing that we thought was really important for our students to understand. This is a day job. You're expected to be here 8 hours a day. That's what we're going to get from you. So that's what we did. When that changed, and campus wide it changed, we went to 2 days a week or 3 days a week for classes. And they went to basically, most of them went from either an hour and a half or 2 hours. And it changed our scheduling. It changed what you taught. It changed how you taught it completely. And so all of that changed. But we did it. We did it because we had to adapt to what was happening right then and there. You know, big changes, constant changes. That's how the program worked, and that's how we tried to make it work. I should say one other thing. One of the things about this program, I think about a lot of the programs, and if you especially look at the guys, be it in culinary or diesel or the heavy equipment, the highline guys, nursing, the one thing that didn't change with all of this was the fact of community. And you had interaction with your classmates from day one until you graduated. And you had that interaction. And you worked with them. And you worked against them sometimes. And you worked and learned to deal with them and figure out who was a resource and who wasn't, and who actually gave you a straight answer, and who, but you actually had that interaction of students. And I got to tell you, I know things have evolved and things continue to evolve, but that's the one thing and I'll disclaimer, you know, I disagree with online classes because you don't have that. You don't have that community, and not to the extent that you do. I mean, that's not to say you don't make connections with people, but you don't make the lifelong connections with people. And that's one of the other values about, being here. I think people made lifelong connections with people here while they were here, because you were spending, what other colleges and universities were you spending 8 hours a day with the same people, just like you would at work?
Okay, time to go to the next question. Can you tell us a little about the now defunct photography and multimedia programs?
Sure. I can. I'll talk about the multimedia one first. Multimedia was an idea, and we all thought at the time that we were trying to kind of put it together, that it was going to fill a niche that needed to be filled. And that was the idea of it. And you start thinking about it, and you start thinking about, it tried to cover a lot of bases. And it was, I think it was, honestly, it was probably good in theory, but it was probably more ambitious as a thought process than it really was a functioning outcome. And that's not to say that people didn't come out with a multimedia degree and didn't go and get jobs, but they quickly found that they had to do some other things along with that to be able to stay employed. The reason I say that, multimedia included web design, web coding, motion graphics, video, and 3D graphics. And what you were going to get in that program was you were going to get a core kind of overview kind of thing that was the first couple of semesters. And then you kind of chose which direction you thought you wanted to go. And so you might say, well, I want to do more web development. Well, you're going to have to do, if you want to do web development, you're going to have to do some coding, but you're also going to have to understand how a web page and how people are going to use it and how they're going to access it and how it is going to work on multiple platforms and things like that. So you're going to have to do a lot of things that direction. Okay, well, what if I want to do 3D? Well, what 3D area do you want to go into? Do you want to go into, Games, well, games has a limited, at the time, had a limited direction that you were going to be able to get into. What about visualization? What about other types of usage of 3D and 3D graphics? Video. At the time, video was just an extension of some photography. It wasn't seen as a complete separate type thing unless you were going to go into TV. Now, that didn't mean that you couldn't do that, but you had to also have that TV experience along with video to be able to do much with it. So what and same thing with motion graphics. You could learn motion graphics using After Effects and things like that, and you could start working in that. But what were you going to do with it, and how far were you going to be able to take it? And we figured out that after in 2 years, you kind of became this. You knew just enough to get yourself in trouble, basically. And if you didn't do it on your own to a certain extent, and really delve into it deeper even than what we could do in class, then you were going to come out of here with, you've got enough to get started, but you better be ready to be doing a whole lot more once you get hired, because they're going to expect a lot more from you, simply because just think about all the different platforms now and different types of coding, that you can actually use and actually were being developed at the time and were actually coming out. So media also started finding themselves, the graduates started finding themselves running into this roadblock. I need you to be able to do a web page, but I only got so much that I need you to do on that web page. What I really need you to do is also design this and put this together and do these things. So what I really want is a graphic design person who can do web, and oh, by the way, do coding and maybe a little video. Okay, so over here I want somebody who can do motion graphics, but I need it to really look cool, because if it looks static and it doesn't really move like we want it to. So what can we do about the design? So what we started seeing is nobody was getting enough in 2 years to continue to do it unless they did something else with it. I mean, they had to learn other skills with it. And so it became, both with our advisors as well as the faculty and as well as feedback from our students, we kind of went, we maybe aren't helping ourselves here. Maybe we need to look at graphic design needs to basically start teaching video as a component as well as motion graphics. And if you want to delve into web, maybe we just need to be doing web design and coding. And maybe what we need to do is share some time with the people in IT who are teaching coding, but they were horrible at design. So what we did is we shared some of the students. Basically, what they did is they took that core over here in multimedia, and then they spent 3 semesters doing coding, hardcore coding in IT. And if they had a student that wanted to do more design, well, we kind of worked with them and gave them elevated design classes. It became one of those things that, like I said, it was a great idea in theory, but unless we had an extra year or more, it was never really going to get. And I will say, we had several students that stayed an extra year, and they got extra classes, and they did extra things, and they have been very successful in their careers now because they did that. But they had to kind of back up and capture more things to be able to be that. And we didn't see being self-sufficient. They couldn't stay. So we chose to break it out and put more of it into the graphic design area, as well as then we broke out 3D, which seemed to be on the cusp of being a lot of what's going to be people were looking at, i.e. now that we can pushing that, now that's where AI has all come from. So we started pushing 3D to be a whole lot more of a standalone directed area of study. And still, we couldn't even cover all the bases there because there's so many different facets of it. But we thought that was a better choice, and so did our advisor. So we kind of disbanded the multimedia, for lack of a better word, and kind of siphoned it into those other 2 areas, either 3D and or graphic design. Photography is a whole different deal. Not to get into the weeds too much, but photography, just like graphic design, was evolving, and it was changing. And it was changing what it did. Still photography was a big component of it still, but there was all kinds of still photography. You could go into journalism, you could go into portrait photography, you could go into wedding photography, you could go into a variety of areas of photography that mainly were still photography. We also started going much more because we kind of did away with some of the video. We went into the video and started. I mean, over a third at the time was videography, and getting into that. And then before they actually closed down the program, we had also been moving into doing the drones and things like that, and thinking, that's going to be another area of photography that people are going to have experience in. They're going to have to actually know what they need to do in it. There's lots of rules and regulations that you have to meet. So we were moving that direction, so that in essence you were doing about half of the curriculum was built around still photography and the production of it, and that included learning how to use Photoshop and using Lightroom and using different programs that were going to enhance and change and literally put the that photography into a whole different realm. You also it became understanding lighting, and for a long time you even had to understand how to do a lot of darkroom work, because you were doing black and white photography, you were doing color photography, and you had to actually be able to develop that yourself and do all that. When these came into play, when your laptops came into play and all, and you could literally go to digital photography, you didn't have to use film anymore, that changed that industry. So we went right along with it. We got rid of all of our lab stuff. We built labs that you had 14 stations for black and white photography, 14 stations for color photography. And then, the development of all that stuff, that all went away because you can now use your laptop. You could actually plug it in. At the time, you could plug it right into the back of your camera. And as soon as you were taking a photo here, it instantaneously was on your computer, and you could be looking at it and seeing what you wanted or what you didn't want. And you weren't shooting, although you could shoot 100 photographs, you didn't waste film because you were just using digital. So in some ways, you went from a ultra expensive course of study, which it was. I mean, you have the processing equipment, you have all those light stands, as far as you all have enlargers, you have 14 of both. You have all these different things, plus you have all the lighting and the backdrops and the cyc wall and everything that you've got to have to have a competent photography program. And then of course you've got to have all of the stuff that because taking the same photograph day in day out gets really boring. So you got to have and be able to have the creativeness to be able to come up with how am I going to shoot a car in the studio? How do I do that? You do it and you figure it out. And you bring in the fog machines, and you bring in extra lighting, and you bring in the soft lights that you have to have for that, and you do all these things, and that becomes expensive. You start getting into the drones. Yes, you can buy cheap ones, you can buy small ones, but they're not professional quality. And again, we've got an advisory committee that's saying, if you do this, you got to do this, and you got to spend this to be able to teach students to be able to do this, for them to be able to be employable. It was an expensive program. Now I digress because we went through kind of a rough patch, I guess, here at OSUIT, as well as all across higher education, and we were constantly told to do more with less. And the bean counters at that point in time they held up their iPhone and they said, why do we need all of this equipment? Why do we need I can take a picture on this iPhone. I can shoot a video on this iPhone. Why do I need all of this equipment? Why do I need to train somebody to do that? Can't I just show them how to do this on my iPhone? I can go take a picture on my iPhone. And my response was, well, I can go take a Kodak Instamatic camera and take a picture too, but I'm not going to say it's professional quality. And I don't know how to do the setup, and I certainly wouldn't know how to adjust or do any lighting for it. But yes, you can do a lot of things on your iPhone, and you can actually do a pretty good picture if you know what you're doing. But it's not professional photography. But when it came down to it, people thought that we were wasting a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of effort to have a program that didn't have an employment numbers at the end. Let me clarify that. A lot of our students came through the program with no other intent than to go be a photographer, okay? And when I say that, that would be a photographer in any fashion. They might want to be a wedding photographer. Well, they may not going to go work for somebody else. They're going to start and hang their own shingle and be a wedding photographer or a portrait photographer. Some may go to work for the newspaper. They're probably going to have to go to a larger newspaper in a larger city because they're the only ones that are going to have hired photographers to do that. Most, unfortunately, the reporters, and they become the photographers at most small town newspapers. So there wasn't employment at that end, but there was still that chance of employment. But for a lot of them, they didn't care. They wanted to be photographers and go do it in whatever way that they wanted to or could. And the people in charge at that particular time did not get that. They didn't understand it. And they didn't see dollar signs. The only dollar signs they saw was money going out, not money coming in. And unfortunately, that's what happened to the program. The photography program was completely the semester they made the decision to do away with it. We already had a full complement. 21 students had already signed up for the course for coming in as brand new students. We already had 21 students. We could take up to 30, but we already had 21, and that was before the end of the high school year had already signed up. So we were ready to start. We would probably easily have had 35 students in that cohort coming in when they canceled the program. And so those people all had to go find someplace else.
Okay, next question. Can you tell us about any of the alumni artists who have held exhibits here? How did these alumni artists feel about their experiences at OSUIT, and what types of jobs have our alumni gotten in the art field?
Okay, well, we'll take one at a time. I don't know, and I don't know who's going to use this, how it's going to be used, but if you have the opportunity to go to the student union here on campus, there are examples of student graduates' work all through the student union. And I will give James Bird props for recognizing that and investing in that artwork, because he did. And he invested in it for this community, for this, not only just OSUIT, but for this community of Omogi. There are people that have had national shows as well as local shows, as well as have sold their work all over, that have representation over in the student union. But the alumni artists have had exhibits here in the Conoco Gallery or Phillips Conoco. I don't know what it is right now. If they're even calling it anything. I don't think they have anything in it right now. But the shows that were in there with not about half of the time, while I was here anyway, we had student work in there. The other half was people that we invited, as far as, in most cases, alumni. And we're talking about exceptional work from a variety of students and a variety of graduates. And it was funny. I was talking with John Hammer, who's got several pieces over there. And I was watching OETA the other night. And of course, they're talking about Will Rogers, and they show the Will Rogers memorial out there. And he's got a painting that he did of Will Rogers that's about 5 feet tall or whatever, about 3 feet wide. But he's got it hanging in their front entrance of the Will Rogers Memorial. And you go, yeah, there's a graduate from here. That's the type of thing. I mean, it's insane the amount of talent and the number of students that they came to OSUIT. Most of them because they wanted to find a way to use, much like me, use their talent. Use their artistic ability. How could I put that into a job that I could actually get paid for? Because my mom and my dad have told me for years, you're never going to make it as an artist. You're going to be a starving artist. So what could I do to use that skill and not starve? Okay? Well, we taught them how to do that. We taught them how to be graphic designers. And for a lot of them, they were graphic designers by day and fine artists by night. And that's how they have spent their career. And they have done exceptionally well, and it show their ability and their talents to, just a extremely high degree, to the point that where they went to work, that was as important as the things they were creating as what they were doing as far as their job, as far as putting things together in a pleasing manner for other people to consume. So I didn't try to. I knew you guys were going to ask me these questions, and I didn't try to because it's too long. The list is too long. We had at one point over in the building, we had over 300 different little placards of each of where our students were graduates, where they were working, what they were doing, and that type of thing was scattered all across the building, and that was the tip of the iceberg. The variety of work that these people have, be it doing illustration or painting or quite frankly, a lot of our alumni have gotten into doing pottery and other types of wood carving, wood working. Some of it, just to again a high level of degree. They've done all kinds of work, and to try to say that there was one or any one thing that it's not doable. As far as where they went to work, the types of field that they were able to go into is just as long a list. I mean, they were graphic designers first and foremost, but they worked all over. I mean, we're talking about working for major oil companies, major aeronautic companies, major corporations, major advertising agencies, and being at the top of the heap. I mean, we've got people who own their own agencies in Dallas, in St. Louis, in California, in out in Los Angeles. They own their own agencies. They own their own. We've got we had one of our graduates came and was one of the commencement speakers. Okay, part of the reason we asked her to come as a commencement speaker was she had just done all of the work for the Academy Awards, all of the booklets, all of the printed materials, all of the things you saw for the Academy Awards. She had been the art director for all of that stuff. She worked for MGM. She worked and was part of the team that we take something for granted with DVDs right now, with where the entrance on the DVD, where it comes on and it tells you the different menus you can select, or on a Blu-ray or whatever. She was in the development team with MGM and Sony to do that. She helped create that. But she was a graphic design student here from Van Buren, Arkansas. That's where she came from. That's where she grew up. Another one comes from, he came from down around Durant and all. He owns an agency now in Dallas that is one of the top agencies in the Dallas Metroplex. He too has been as a speaker at one of the graduations. I mean, the variety of things that these people have done. I mean, like I said, be it owning their own businesses, owning their own companies, working for some of the biggest ones. Saatchi and Saatchi is a quick example. They're an international advertising agency. Two of their creative directors are graduates from here. I mean, we're not talking that these people did small town stuff. We're talking about people that are working for corporations like, Purina, Lever Brothers, different corporations, be it, like I said, Phillips Petroleum, a lot of the ones that a lot of our other graduates go to work in other areas. Our graduates work for them in their promotions and their graphics area. And they've done that for years. I mean, I think Robbie Van Hooser asked me one time, she goes, how many people can you put down and play? And I think I gave her, she ever wanted, I think I gave her about 500 different people and names and places where they were working and what they were doing and where the type of work. And it's just crazy. Some people have moved on from graphic design and don't do that anymore. They've moved into being marketing managers and being representatives for their companies and all, but they started their careers as a graphic designer. That's where they got their foot in the door. So and full disclosure, I've also got people, because they came here and they enjoyed their experience, which is one of the questions you asked about as far as what they thought about it. They enjoyed the experience so much that they're now teaching graphic design to other people with the same theory and the same ideas that we instilled in them. And they've gone to do it in public schools, they've gone to do it in VOTEX, they've gone to do it in, or tech centers, whatever you want to call them, and they've gone on to other colleges and universities, and even to being the deans of those universities. So it's not been one area or one kind of thing that these folks have gone into. And when you start talking about, you add in the 3D and you add in the photography and you add in printing, which we used to be huge, like I said before, and you start looking at those people and where they have gone, it's innumerable. And they were able to do that with the skill sets and the understanding that they, you know, received from here. And it's to me it's pretty cool, because it's one of those things where, you know, you can run into a graduate, and it's kind of weird. You can run into graduates just about anywhere. I've found them all over, and it's always kind of exciting when you do, and I keep in touch with a whole lot of them, and it's kind of exciting to be able to do that. So.
Okay, next question is, how do you feel about the current state of the graphic design and 3D animation programs?
I don't know. I think it's unfortunate what's happened to it since 2020. You know, 2020, with COVID and everything else, everything went so much online. You went from a faculty base of anywhere from 9 to 12 faculty that interacted with the students on a daily basis here on campus, to one full-time faculty in 3D and one full-time faculty in graphic design. And the rest of them are all adjunct and they're all online. And to me, as I said before, it doesn't mean that you don't have some community, but you don't have the community that you had and that was built up until that point. And the fact that you're doing that also means that nobody cares that that person is from OSUIT or they're from, you know, Goaty Bow, Oklahoma. You know, wherever. It doesn't make any difference. They're not clued in. They're not OSUIT for that area has lost its ability to be something that people, you know, proudly said that I'm a graduate of that program because I got this kind of instruction and all. And now I basically go and get most of my instruction from hired guns. And they don't have any dog in the fight. There's no real and I say this strictly from some of the people I have talked with recently, and more importantly, I've talked to some of the employers and people that were on our advisory committees and talked to them, and they have asked me what happened to the program. So I'm not in it. I don't do it. I'm not involved in it, you know, to be able to give you a clear idea. I'm thinking, you know, about this the other day. I'm almost 5 years out that I left here. And it's surprising how much has been lost in that 5 years. And maybe you guys can tell me, when you no longer have a building, you don't have a place, you don't have any place that is where you're located. You've basically been shuffled 3 different places. You have a couple of rooms in IT, and you got a couple of rooms in maybe the Noble Center now, and you don't have a home. Then you don't have community, and you don't have the relationships, and you don't have the loyalty that people. And I will tell you, I didn't start here to 1984. Okay, I started here in 84, in the basically the fall of 84. And, you know, right as we were moving from, you know, going from doing everything by hand to the computer. I know graduates that graduated back in the 60s. And I know what they were doing then. And I saw that evolution and that change happening in the 70s when I was here. And then this huge change that happened in the mid 80s and into the 90s. And I would venture to put this out there, and I will even ask you could ask some of these other college instructors from other colleges, who is your biggest competition for jobs, for students, for awards at shows, for any of those things? Who is your biggest competition, especially during the late 80s, all through the 90s, all through the 2000s, and into, the last 10 years? And they will tell you, OSUIT. We couldn't get by you guys. You always beat us to the punch as far as employment. You always beat us at these shows. We'd go to these things. We'd think, oh, well, we're going to go to Wichita. They won't be there. Oh, darn. There they are. There they are again. We go to Dallas. Oh, they won't be in Dallas. Oh, dadgummit. There they are again. We go to, that was what we were doing. We were competing against every four-year school and beating their pants off. But not just in those competitions that were college oriented. We were beating their pants off in the employment area too, because our graduates were coming out with skills that those people weren't teaching them. And that saddens me today because I don't see that. And that's what I'm saying. I'm being told by people that are still working day in, day out in the industry, they're not seeing books from here. They're not seeing students from here. And when they do, they're not seeing what they expect or what they were used to. So I'm not encouraged by that. I'm sorry to say.
Okay, next question. What is your proudest accomplishment?
I've said it a couple of times, and I really truly mean it. My biggest accomplishment, my proudest accomplishment here is the connection that I made with students and faculty and the people I worked with here on campus. That was my accomplishment. That's what I feel proudest about. I enjoyed that part of it. I enjoyed being in the, as far as accomplishing, was being able to be at graduation and to be able to hand off, that people were leaving and going across the stage and they were going to go out here and experience something that I felt passionate about. And I felt that there was a community here that supported that for most of the time that I was here. As far as accomplishments, it's in the students. That's where the accomplishment is. I am always happiest, proudest, excited when I get an email or something on Messenger or a hi sign on Facebook or whatever, and I get something from a graduate. That just brightens my day, and that means that somehow I impacted them, that they're willing to take the time to reach out to me and say, "Hey, Mac, how are you doing?" Those that's to me, that's the biggest part of having spent 35 years here, and that's the best part about it because, you know. But the secondary part of that is Mary left when? How far long ago? Yeah, did you see the reaction with her? She's somebody I mean, she wasn't just somebody we worked with here on. She's bud. She's somebody that you can pick right up with, and she's that my neighbor used to be over here. That's how you meet people, and then they're lifelong friends of yours, more than acquaintances, and that's an accomplishment in my books.
Okay, final question. What were your biggest challenges?
What did Mark say? Biggest challenge was get some brochures, go put your greeter uniform on, and go down to Walmart to try to find students. No, the biggest challenges were just staying up. The with everything changing, and as everything changed, how did we stay up? How do you stay up? How do you figure out how to afford the stuff that needed to be part of the program? Because again, and this didn't just happen once. It happened the whole time I think I was here. How much can you do more for less? Because there's no money, no money, no money. So that always was a challenge to try to figure out how could we do what we needed to do, prepare students to be able to be in this industry and do it on a shoestring. That was always a challenge. And it was probably one of the biggest ones because it was always something that got held over your head when you went to our Friday meetings. Are you making? Do you got enough? Do you got enough students? Are you going to be able to do? And where's their employment? And you got your numbers and blah blah blah. And I mean, those challenges could become, I try not to let them to be, but they could become overly, self-consumed. But the bottom line is, it was a challenge. It was a challenge. Students and parents and buildings and parking and roofs and whatever. I mean, those are always going to be challenges. I don't care. That's part of the thing you signed up for. That's part of it. But trying to stay on top of making that happen, and to be able to do that, and to be able to do it in hopefully good humor, and be able to do it week after week and day after day, and to then be able to see the results of it. That was a challenge. But I didn't really mind it, because the whole if it was easy, everybody'd do it, and it wasn't. But on the other hand, not everybody did it, and they sure didn't do it the way we were doing it, and they sure weren't having the results that we were. So the challenges were there. I'm not going to get into. There certainly were challenges with personalities and some people and some things, but it's not worth it. I don't dwell on that, and I just don't have the time or energy, or maybe do I care anymore. Might have if you'd asked me this in September of 2019, I might have had a different answer for you. But today, I really, that's what I saw as our biggest challenge, was just trying to do the very best we could, and do it at the most economical way we could on a regular basis, and see exceptional results. That was the challenge. It was okay, because that didn't hurt anybody, and it didn't cause us to go out and go postal on somebody or anything like that. So.
Okay, any closing remarks before we move on to Mary?
I'll just say this, OSUIT, and like I said, I went through several iterations of it. It became several different names and all, and it was a good ride. I enjoyed it overall. Didn't like much of the way that it ended, but I'll be honest with you, it ended at a good time for me, because I wouldn't have wanted to be here during all the stuff that happened with the pandemic and everything else. I wouldn't have wanted to try to teach or be a part of all of that, because I think that would have sent me over the edge. But you look back and you say, again, I've been blessed. I didn't come looking for a job here, but I got one. I wasn't looking for a career here, but I got one. I wasn't necessarily ever expecting to be the division chair or anybody in an administrative area. It happened. I got to do a lot of things, and meet a lot of people, and be a part of a lot of adventures. And at the end of the day, I can't say I don't have any regrets, but overall, I'm pretty happy with my time here. And hopefully, barring a few people, they thought it was okay for me to be here too. So, but that's it. That's me. That's it in a nutshell, sort of. It's kind of a large nutshell.
We're very grateful to have you here. Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome. I'm glad to have been able to do it.